Okay, I realise I'm one of the last presentations between dinner, so we'll try to keep it brief. I'm Euwe Ermita. I'm the Digital Library Systems Manager at the State Library of New South Wales. I guess the presentation today is really a retrospective look. We've been live with Rosetta for the last 6 months, so it's looking at our approach to our implementation for Rosetta. Over the last couple of days, I could see that there's different use cases. Primarily, I think when Artie had a poll up, there's quite a lot of institutions using Rosetta as dark archives. We're probably up at the other end of the spectrum. We're not just using Rosetta for our preservation system, but we're using a lot of the other features of Rosetta. So I'm interested to see what everyone's thoughts are. And the last part of the presentation will be with Teresa, opening up the discussion around integrations with Rosetta. Okay, so a bit about the State Library of New South Wales. It's the oldest library in Australia. It's probably not as old as a lot of the European libraries, but it is the oldest library, and it's located in Sydney, and it's home to a lot of significant collections, such as the First Fleet diaries, the World War I diaries, and Sir Joseph Banks' collection as well. A bit of statistics on our collection. We have over 13,000 linear meters of manuscripts, over 26,000 pieces of realia, which includes swords, coins, locks of hair, and over 500,000 prints, which includes drawings, paintings, and maps. And our collection is currently valued at over $3.15 billion as well, which is a significant proportion of the state's assets. So really kicking off, Rosetta started as part of the Digital Excellence Program. So we were pretty much well funded by the state government. It was a $72 million grant over 10 years, and it was divided into 2 streams. The first stream is around Digitisation Program, and it's really about fast-tracking all the digitisation efforts that we were currently doing. And the second part is where Rosetta was implemented, is the Digital Infrastructure Renewal Program. And it was really about renewing our aging infrastructure and integrating our archives and our published collection management functions. And of course, introducing digital preservation into the institution. So before the digitisation for the Digital Excellence Program started, we were probably digitising around 30,000 items per year. With introduction of the funded program, we're looking at approximately about 12 million items digitised over 10 years, which is still tip of the iceberg in terms of the size of our collection, which is an ever-growing collection as well. The second part of the program is the Digital Infrastructure Renewal Program in 2015. We gave birth to, I guess, triplets from Ex Libris. It was the Alma, Primo, Rosetta, and there was also a strategic partnership with Axial in terms of Adlib, which is the archival collection management system. So an overall architectural view about these 4 systems, which we call the integrated collection management systems. The view was we're going to implement all 4 systems within a year, but as it turned out, it ended up being a couple of years. But still, it was a very aggressive timeframe which we were able to deliver on. The first part is Adlib, which is our archival collection management system. Underneath that is Alma, which is purely for our published physical, digital, and electronic collections. And next is Rosetta, obviously with our digital asset management, digital preservation, and deposit. And sitting over the top of all that is Primo as well. Each one of these systems also had to integrate with new systems we were implementing, which include our ERP systems, as well as moving from GML to O365. So this is our vision for Rosetta. And again, I think it differs from a lot of users here. We did have a digital preservation remit when we purchased Rosetta, but we also were looking at having additional DAM functionality. Digital deposit is a large part of the function, as well as then on the other side, providing full access and delivery via Rosetta. And some of the ingests that we're looking at are digitized. I talked about the Digital Excellence Program, looking to digitize content, but are born digital as well. So it's looking how we can ingest and preserve and manage websites, social media, and some of the born digital photography as well. But then looking at the DAM use case, the digital asset management use case for non-collection items, is there another workflow we could potentially use in Rosetta to ingest things which are potentially corporate photography, for instance? And there's other use cases for digital asset management. So for us, we had multiple ways we could implement Rosetta. Again, we had quite an aggressive time frame, but we looked at potentially implementing Rosetta as a turnkey or out-of-the-box solution. And that's really where the plug-and-play comes in. Just because you've installed it and configured it doesn't necessarily mean it's fit for purpose yet. So that's what we had to look at. The next, moving up I guess the radar, where it's about light configuration and customization. Was that enough to get us over the line to say that we've met our business objectives? And further, it's potentially not where we wanted to head towards, but it's another option is, did we have to further extend Rosetta to meet our business objectives? So in the context of plugging in a system, for us, it meant integrating Rosetta into the library's digital ecosystem. And that comprised corporate as well as library applications. At the time, this was Rosetta 4. We are on Rosetta 5.2, but we architected Rosetta for high availability and high reliability as well. So what you'll see here is, if I can, on this side, we had 2 delivery servers. And these delivery servers also had other roles. They had API access, and they're load balanced. And for staff, we had a private network which enabled mass ingestion of our content. So we had 4 servers in essence, which had different roles in Rosetta. This is called I guess a demilitarized zone, which means that for security, we were able to segregate what was needed for staff versus what was needed for public. One area that we did want to work with Exlibris closely on was potentially replicating the Oracle database. This is still a single point of failure for us. So even though we've got high availability across both delivery as well as ingest, looking at the Oracle database to see what we can do to minimize and potentially mitigate against possible downtime. Also plugging in, at the time we had the opportunity to leverage existing enterprise infrastructure, specifically around storage and in terms of preservation principles, ensuring that we kept 3 copies. So the first side of it was using our on-premise Isilon. We have a data center at the State Library of New South Wales. So we leveraged that for our deposit operational as well as our permanent storage in Rosetta. But we've also had a government data center, an offsite data center which mirrored and replicated our on-site. And we also use backup as a service as well. So we've plugged it in, but now it's about playing. So in terms of playing, what did we have to do to configure, customize, and potentially extend Rosetta's functionality? The first was developing SIP scripts. We did try to use Rosetta's out-of-the-box features to do mass ingestion, but because we had a big digitization effort and we were looking at pushing through a lot of items through the backlog, we did have to go down the path. We are lucky that we have resource developers to develop these SIP scripts. So these SIP scripts had to enable mass ingestion. They're Python scripts and they're configured by JSON files. This is just an example of a bit of usage for the Python scripts. And it allows us to ingest a variety of formats and collections. But it does require technical capabilities. So having a couple of devs in our team really helps us to get through the backlog as well as potentially any other sort of challenging issues. And the main thing here is the SIP scripts, they also integrate with our catalogs. So where appropriate, they would grab the descriptive metadata from our published collection, which is Alma, or they would grab the descriptive information from Adlib, which is our unpublished collection management system. The next out-of-the-box thing that we looked at was staff really wanted to be able to use similar functionality to what they had around the digital asset management system. So this meant downloading huge sets of data, specifically digital assets. We did try to use Rosetta's download function, but unfortunately we have IEs, for instance, that could be 1,000 digital assets in one representation. But there are use cases where staff don't want to download the whole thing or individual. So we developed a Java desktop application which enables staff to just check what they wanted to download, and it will save locally to their computer as well. Another play side of things, because we're not just a dark archive, but we want to use big data, where there's a partnership that we have with the University of Technology Sydney, specifically around big data, and they wanted to get full API access to our information. This project is a auto tagging pilot. So essentially, we shipped off, this is a machine learning type project, where we shipped off 30,000 images from Rosetta. And we're training their machines to try to identify people, places, things, and objects automatically and tag them automatically as well. We used 20,000 images and 10,000 for training the machine, and 10,000 images to test. And the great thing is we had a high level of accuracy, but with any machine learning, you have to keep feeding it and training those machines. So this is another specific use case that we're looking at for Rosetta. It was developing the Customise API access, which researchers and potentially humanities may want to use in terms of access and delivery of your content. The next thing is we're also lucky to have a DX lab, which is a lab environment which is about innovation. So the DX lab want to play with Rosetta. And what we're looking at is, this here is a visualization of how much content we've digitized based on geographic location in Sydney. Now these are, I'm not sure if it comes up well, but these are mounds, and it shows how much digitized content there is for that specific area. So again, this is another use case, which means that the DX lab, they would really like full access to our APIs so they can pull in information. So there's a couple of use cases here. It's not just about downloading full sets of high resolution images, but getting access to these METs, descriptive metadata, technical metadata, administrative metadata as well. And we weren't there yet. There was a combination of us extracting and them transforming, but what we'd like to do is get to an asynchronous. So we are excited about potentially Rosetta 6 to see what we can move towards, but it's full API access, and it's potentially VIP access versus public. What would public like to do in terms of playing with our assets? The next was, we did investigate the out-of-the-box viewers, but for us, we have a resource team to be able to look at user experience, and we needed to make sure that our viewers also look seamless across the breadth of our suite of online presence. So this is an external viewer for images. It uses a combination of Rosetta APIs. This is an API from our collection management systems. Either it'll be Adlib or Alma, and that's where it gets the descriptive information. It gets file level information from Rosetta, and what we're hoping to do is also have a lot of download access. Open access to high resolution images is one of the big strategies we're trying to push forward towards, and providing different levels of resolutions of access is something that we'd like to provide in this little area as well. Adlib user interface integration is another thing. So this is Adlib's native public-facing front end, and what we have here is Adlib's descriptive metadata and a bit of hierarchy contained below. But over here is Rosetta's embedded FLs. So I'll talk about how these get embedded into an Adlib record, and essentially it's a workflow that we implemented during the project. Everyone's obviously familiar with the OAIS, but where does Adlib fit into this in terms of Rosetta's context? Adlib touches, its touch point is with deposit, and its other touch point is with publishing. So the first use case that we developed during implementation was for an archivist to be able to deposit a digital item from within an ad-lib record. The actual start of the process does start with Alma because we use Alma for our accessionings and our acquisitions. But then once that accession record has been created, the archivist goes into ad-lib. From that point on, within the ad-lib record, they attach digital objects by dragging and dropping. These then get pushed off to Rosetta, creates a SIP package, and goes to deposit storage. Rosetta validates and ingests, and all things going well, it moves to preservation. Rosetta then updates ad-lib with the FL identifiers. So that means now ad-lib records have got the specific images it needs to embed and reference to. Then the last end is about publishing to Primo. So we push our ad-lib records to Primo and eventually gets harvested and updated. That's the first use case, and this use case is about from an archivist's perspective. The second is using ad-lib to suppress images. So specifically, they don't have to log into Rosetta to suppress images using access rights, but they start in ad-lib, in the archival record. Each archival record has a relationship to each one of the files, and essentially there's a little checkbox which says suppress digital images from catalog. They check that. It uses APIs to update the access rights in in Rosetta, sorry. And then eventually Rosetta to ad-lib, it updates the FLs, the files, sorry. And then it goes through the publishing to ensure that images are suppressed, they come out of the indexing. And the final use case, which is probably about if we talk about the 90, even the 95-5 rule, 95% of our content is batch ingested. So we work closely with Axial and Exlibris around how we can batch ingest a lot of our content. And we developed a GUI on top, and we have a project actually which is looking at pre-ingest scripts, SIP scripts, as well as trying to monitor all the way through. So we have metrics from deposit all the way to delivery. We are trying to get defined metrics within that, and this is going to help us. And I'm excited about AIP and being able to report back statuses through AIP. But essentially what this is it allows us to batch ingest and update catalog records on the fly. The nice thing here is we're using a bit of architecture in terms of cloud, and what the pre-ingest scripts allow us to do are a lot of the fixity, the validation, the identification, the virus checking through what we call workers. So we can horizontally scale. So if we need to, we can spin up a few servers to be able to run these worker threads. And what that means is we can push a lot more content through. Right now we're benchmarking how much ingest we can do with Rosetta, and we're hoping to really push it up and scale up as well. So I guess in terms of the plug-and-play ability, because of our what looks like a unique use case, we had to have a lot of considerations here because we're not just using it as dark archive, but it's for full access and delivery as well as API access. So we architected based on high availability. Again, it's something we're going to review with the latest Rosetta. Storage, we're currently leveraging enterprise storage. What we want to do is work with institutions around here as well about seeing what Amazon can do, but also storage as a service as well. We pay a lot of capital upfront to purchase, some arrays of storage, but looking at how we can get a bit more creative with that. Mass ingestion, again, we had to customize our scripts because of the volume that was coming through. User experience is one big remit for the state library, so it's ensuring that our viewers are responsive, they adhere to certain standards, and they collaborate well as well. And integrations workflow, it's not just integrating with systems, but it's actually providing an end-to-end workflow. So understanding what archivists are trying to do, it's their life cycle. I know we talked about the research data life cycle today, but it's what do archivists do about trying to attach digital objects, and where do we plug into that life cycle? And then capabilities, and I'll talk a bit more during Michelle's lightning talk, but just because we've plugged and we've played these systems doesn't necessarily mean staff are ready to actually use them as well. So it's about what digital capabilities do we need to be able to support a full digital preservation program. So I guess for our findings, we sit up this end of the scale where because of our business objectives, we had to do quite a lot of external feature development, but the nice thing is Rosetta's open architecture enabled us to do that as well. Maybe working closely with Ex Libris in the community, we'd like to see more of the potential plugins and things available out of the box because we have done a lot of work, and we will be releasing a lot of our code onto GitHub as well. So future plans, it's trying to understand the difference between the digital asset management capability in Alma-D versus what we can do in Rosetta. It's the DAM use case for non-collection items. We haven't even touched that yet. It's about the discovery. So one of the questions I asked today was about transcripts. If we wanted to publish our transcripts to Primo, for instance, which are transcriptions, so if we have a digital image and we publish that to Primo, how can people search across that? We don't want to add too much noise, so would we have a kind of like in an electronic world, a full text search available, so you're not just searching bibliographic index, you're searching across a full text. So we'd like to see what we can do around that as well. We do a lot of crowdsourcing. We do crowdsourcing for images, but we also do crowdsourcing for audio. And hierarchies. We publish a lot of our hierarchical content to AdLib, and it's not just at the collection level, but because of the way we've catalogued, it goes from collection, series, and items. So we want to be able to show at least a visual cue that it belongs to a greater collection. So how can we show context in Primo? I touched on the digital storage strategy and seeing what we can do around digital preservation. And I guess the gold standard is being able to have these end-to-end workflows. That is a nice place to be able to get to. So staff aren't having to work across multiple systems and understanding different practices, but it's a streamlined workflow. And then once you're in that workflow, how can you report? How can you have strong metrics across that? And then finally, because AdLib and Rosetta are strategic things around digital preservation, how can we look at a roadmap for improving that AdLib archive integration? Okay, so I'll probably have a couple of minutes for questions if anyone has questions. Okay, but otherwise I'll hand over to Teresa.
Thanks. So, just to give you a kind of sense of how this presentation came to be. Last year, we had these breakout sessions where we got into small groups and we discussed different topics. And one of this year, I thought, I don't know, I'm trying to figure out how to integrate my archival management system, my collection management system with Rosetta. And so maybe I could pick everyone's brain about how they've done this and what are the things that they've done that have been useful and what are some of the integration points that we should consider. And also in discussion with Adi a bit about this because we don't really have development. We don't have developers and that focus on Rosetta or library systems, and so we would need something that would need to be developed in partnership, and so that's kind of how we came in touch. And I realized that that Rosetta has actually been integrated in some ways with an archival management system with AdLib. And I also started learning a bit about, we use archive space for our archival management system, and archive space has actually been integrated with Archivomatica and also with Preservica. And so I was looking at, in those cases, what are the integration points? How are they integrated? How could this help make our workflows more efficient? And so I guess first of all, to give you a little bit of sense of kind of how things exist now, it's kind of funny because you kind of had all the answers and my questions that you answered are coming after that. But just to give you a sense of what we're dealing with, and I guess I should have said I'm at the Getty Research Institute in Los Angeles. You probably know that already. I'm going to show you kind of how our system is right now. So this is, you don't need to read this, but just to give you a sense of what our finding aids look like right now. And this is a collection that has maybe right now we've digitized about 50,000 photographs from the collection, but there's all kinds of other things in the collection. And the only way that we have right now to take all of this rich metadata and create SIPs is essentially to export it from archive space as EAD XML. We use style sheets that then pull apart different sections and create kind of a basic Dublin core record. So you can't really see this, but so this is a collection of architectural photography by Julius Schulman, and you'll see that there's these different jobs. So he did, one job was for the Stanley House in Los Angeles, one was for the West Covina Fashion Plaza in lovely West Covina, California. And for each of those jobs, we have digitized some of the images, some of the photographs. But we don't have a lot of information about them. It just says the job number, the architect, the name of the architect. We know that Julius Schulman was the photographer for all of these, and we have the location and the name of the building. For, in this case, something like, 50 images. So what we needed to do, of course, is we need to extract this data. We need to turn it into something that people can then search for and find in Primo. So you'll see, you kind of recognize here, we've created this record that does actually look pretty full, but I'll explain why in a minute. You've got the title, you've got the architect and the photographer's names, the date, that kind of thing. The rest of this record is all just the same for there are 5,000 of these jobs, and each record is the same except for the title, the architect, the pieces of metadata that I mentioned. And those, like I said, had to be done by extracting the XML, transforming it into Dublin core record, this Dublin core record that is coming from Rosetta into Primo. And then if you select, if you click on the thumbnail here, you'll get into the Rosetta viewer. And you'll see here, we've also got a little bit of hierarchy, and some of our collections have much more than this, but you'll see there are black and white prints and there are color images. And that's actually kind of coming from in the finding aid, where you'll see these different formats are being called out, right? You've got negatives, you've got contact prints. In this case, we didn't digitize the negatives, we didn't digitize the contact prints, so we've only got kind of a partial digitization of this. And then also, in this case, this is a very complex example, which is partially why I wanted to show it. And also in this case, we've got additional metadata right here, which are the individual shot numbers. So he, the job number for him, he organized his archive really well, and on the back of each image, he had written the shot numbers. And so, this one's 5430-11 and 12. And the way that those got in here is that the photographers, when they were shooting this collection of 50,000 photographs, they typed in those shot numbers to a spreadsheet, while they were photographing. So they're cataloging the collection essentially while they're digitizing it. And so this is original metadata that doesn't exist in the finding aid. So you start to get into these kind of complex ecosystems, and then this collection is one of our most popular collections, and so at some point someone may come along and say, I want to look at these contact prints right here, and I see you didn't digitize those. Can you do that? And so we'll digitize those. Then we've got to add them to this IE. We've got to update, the metadata here because this has 8 items, and now we have 20 or whatever. So that gives you a sense of kind of the moving parts, which brings me to all of these kind of questions I have about, what makes sense in terms of integration. I wouldn't expect Rosetta to fully, or I wouldn't expect Ex Libris to develop something that would address all of our specific needs because they're not the same as other customers, and so in some cases. So I thought it would be good to get a sense from you all, who here has done an integration with an archival management system, and where have you found kind of the points, you know, the most important areas where you're gaining something, because all of this work is manual. I mean, we did it on a batch, obviously, but it's all little scripts and little style sheets and little, you know, spreadsheets and all of that kind of thing. So when Euwe and I were talking about this presentation, we kind of came up with some of these open questions. So first of all, is anyone else interested in this kind of integration? Dave? Other people? Some other people? Is anyone currently doing it with another system besides AdLib? Yeah? Is it the scope archive? Yeah. Is it the same kind of, some of the similar issues where you've got this hierarchy and you've got similar? Yeah. Yeah.
We've integrated with our archival catalog, and it's nothing anyone here would have heard of. So it's just our bespoke Archway Archives New Zealand system. And in terms of integration, it's the loosest integration you've ever seen, because the system was developed for like every other archive in the whole world, like paper first, and then digital had to be shoehorned in. And so I don't know all of the technical side of the integration, but through the archival catalog, we have to generate the catalog ID, and then the catalog ID has to be delivered with the SIP into Rosetta. So there's like a back and forth jump.
Mm-hmm.
And once it's in Rosetta, OAI PMH delivers the hyperlink fully ingested file back to the catalog. Catalog checks whether it's open access or restricted. If it's open, it can deliver the hyperlink to the user. And so the user just finds the reference in the catalog and clicks on the record, and it says if there's a digital record available, there's this tab, and they can click on the hyperlink, and then we just end up going back to the default Rosetta viewers. No user experience type thing going on there. And then recently there was I don't know what the protocol is backwards, but recently developers at work have allowed name updates in the catalog to go back into Rosetta.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I'm not sure if that's going to be useful to you, or I mean, we can certainly go back and fill that story in more detail for you. And we will also be moving to a new archival management system sometime in the next period of time, because they're just starting to think about that now. But who knows how long it's going to take to do the design and the tender and everything else. So I mean, there'll be a story there. But whether it's one of these solutions or an off-the-shelf solution or something else, or it's just going to be bespoke, I've got no idea. But anything you want to know, just ask.
But I guess the question is there a way is there something that can be developed in Rosetta that would facilitate that kind of work? From your perspective, just thinking about that.
The big thing really is, I mean, for me, the first thing that I would want to avoid is that double hop. So you want to have, in a way, you kind of almost want the catalog reference generated by Rosetta, and that would be, but that sounds crazy. I can hear it. The silence in the room. But because, I mean, your catalog is central to your, you're going to hate me. Your catalog is what's central to your institution. I'm afraid Rosetta isn't. Like, Rosetta can be replaced. And there are other systems out there. And you're never going to, if you build your capability into your digital presentation system for your archival catalog, ex-libris might love it, but down the line you might not, to be frank, in the nicest possible way.
But I guess what the things that I've seen in the other integrations that are interesting to me is the idea of Kind of similarly to the way that you can now start a digitization process in Alma for digitizing a book or something, how you might start a digitization process in archive space or AdLib or something, and you can say, I have this digitized thing, and you kind of start a process that then would package things up in a way that Rosetta would accept them, and then create the SIP and push it into Rosetta, which would bring over with it all of the kind of hierarchy. I think the hierarchy is the part that is the trickiest. And if I wanted to replicate the hierarchy of archives in Rosetta right now, I would need to create a collection and a sub-collection and all these sub-collections, and then add all the IEs for that kind of area, hierarchy level to that collection. And if I wanted to add another, thing from that same series or a different sub-series, and I'd have to kind of construct all of that. There are probably ways to do it that don't involve doing it in the user interface, but just thinking about kind of how, we've already done the work. In our archival management system, we have all of that hierarchy, and we have a lot of staff that are, special collections cataloging and archivists that are working on it. So it does feel a bit, there needs to be some kind of synchronization, right? Because otherwise, they're editing things all the time and not telling me, and then mine is not synchronized, and we don't use it as a dark archive. We're pushing that right to Primo, and so there's this issue. So definitely. But I would like to hear more about the way that you've done it as well. Yeah. Thank you.
So, Teresa, one of the things I'm interested in, we try to replicate archive spaces using collections in Rosetta, and collections in Alma, and collections in Rosetta, in Primo, but we couldn't actually get that EAD structure working properly because we were losing context. So we've actually gone back to looking at archival management system to handle those sort of collections. So one of the things we're interested about is we're looking at archive spaces initially. We might go some process or something else. But it'd be interesting from your example where you actually pull up that digital object and then being able to link from that digital object back into that part of the EAD, because that's important, because I don't want people going from the top of the EAD and trying to find that image in here. Have you given that any thought?
Yeah, one thing that we're kind of in the absence of something like this existing at this point, we've started looking into the potential of IIIF, and maybe this is a kind of lead into Oprah's talk, but into kind of IIIF has a collections infrastructure specification, or collections spec as well. So kind of having those, whether it's from archive space or some other collection management system, having those IDs for the component of the item that you've digitized in Rosetta in some way, and being able to kind of match it that way. So that's something that we're looking into. We've actually, we're doing kind of a pilot with one collection where we are putting the archive space IDs into the Rosetta METs inside the structure map as an ID. I don't know if it didn't seem to complain when I tried that, so we'll see going forward. But I think that's part of it, is that these archival collections are so heavy on context, and you kind of a lot of times need, where you are is kind of inheriting data from many levels above, and yeah, it can get, it's, putting something like that into something like Primo that's completely flat, it just doesn't make any sense. Like we've said before, it doesn't make a lot of sense because it removes the context. Yeah.
Indeed, regarding context and hierarchy in Primo, what we currently actually have been looking at is using facets for that. So the agreement is to have a number of levels. We decided currently arbitrary on 5, why not? Levels within the archive management system collection to be actually indexed as facets, as a way of having some context, because a tree is really, a tree in Primo is not feasible or not, and I don't think I would want it actually. But facets is more like, compared to full text search, it's more, you find something on a text search, you want to know where it is actually. You will know you find this, and actually within the context of level 1 in this and this category, and then when you click on the facet within category level 2, you find this and this category. Which seems to make much more sense in that case. Regarding that, we're actually we're working on an OAI harvester for our archive system, actually, to get direct to have Primo harvest from Scope Archive, our archive management system directly. Not through Rosetta. We deliberately try to avoid to have metadata in Rosetta. We see the archive management system as the system. And they would have a link. Our system supports adding digital objects to the archive management system description. And the whole thing is very much like what you explained. It's a workflow thing. It's like getting something ready from the archive and putting it through a workflow, but in the end, it results in an update of the archive management system. We have two major workflows there. It could be that there is a description ready, made in the archive management system. They decide to add digital objects to it, like a scan on demand thing, something like that. We have situations where there's a bulk of digital data delivered, which in the end they want to describe, but they don't want to create all the hierarchy for this, and this data is already in a certain hierarchy. They want to mirror, at least in the beginning, and then actually the workflow will work with it. Everything is ingested into Rosetta, all the objects, and the whole hierarchy is actually exported and created along with digital with the IE numbers into the archive management system. Those are our main workflows regarding that.
But for the facets, have you done any usability?
Not yet. We're thinking about this. Is this a proposal that's now with the archivists, which, well, we still need to get an agreement with that.
There's one additional thing to that. It will also show the breadcrumb on top of the record. There's one additional thing. We shall also show. We will also show the breadcrumbs where you are in the hierarchy. And then, in addition, you have the facets you can go further in detail.
Is that they go link,
Yeah.
across?
Yes.
Wow.
So it's still flat.
Yes, it's still flat. Yes, absolutely.
But then, if you go up 2 levels, what would it show you? Just that question information at that level, or that level information,
And
and down?
So does it do a like a pre-search, kind of like a facet with the breadcrumbs? Will it show you all the search results under that level of hierarchy?
the breadcrumb will be displayed on the results, not on the search. The breadcrumb thing is on each individual result. Whenever you look for something and you find it throughout your hierarchy, the breadcrumb will actually indicate where in your hierarchy this specific object was found as a linear thing and not a full-blown tree thing, but it will show you well it's in within this administrative area, etc., etc.
So within the brief record,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
So, you still have you
We're developing this.
So,
Payments and images go on the
Yes.
maybe not. So, how does that end? Do you see any problems with, because we have through our files, we don't have our files.
If it goes into Primo, it's public. Basically, that's it.
I know, we're working on our files, so that's all the time. Some of our files on colleagues actually, some of our.
Running. Yeah. We don't see any problems right now. When an archive, that's what we have in our workflows, or when an archive is closed, when it's finished, and the ID will be generated. And we will just in Rosetta so to preserve the archive metadata in Rosetta, which will be searchable. We will try to do a full text search on that, on the ID. Can the archive itself can be found.
Until tomorrow. We got 3 days and 3 nights.
That's what I did.
So yeah, so I guess if you're, thank you for, participating in that. And if you are curious about, these are just some of the questions that came to mind. And also the Delivery and Integrations Working Group is going to be working a lot on kind of these types of questions and trying to come up with some kind of more concrete requirements for making these, making archival collections more.
Do you think that would fit in something like the SysOps working group or something?
We're doing it in the Delivery and Integrations Working Group. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.